What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. I'm Scott, here with Michael and Drew. As always, this is the Elder Scrolls podcast, and today we are talking about Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination and plenty of other unfortunate things. But let's get into it. Which one of you guys would like to take it away?
I will say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, me, not the Daedrologist.
Not Daedrologist is being curved.
Not Daedrologist Drew. I just wanted to say he's got so many titles. I haven't checked, but I think that he has more titles than any other Daedric prince.
He's
Lord of
compensating
Corruption.
for sure.
Yeah, the Sower of Strife, the God of Brutality, Prince of Murder, Dark Lord, God of Schemes, Harvester of Souls, Prince of Domination, Lord of Brutality, Dreadlord, Lord of Cold Harbor, Dark... There's too many. In fact, the wiki dedicated an entire section to his titles. Molag the Slave Lord, the Schemer, there's Captain of Corruption. There's just too many names going on.
Seems like a pretty chill guy.
Yeah, so if you haven't gathered from all of those titles, Molag Bal is not a particularly friendly Daedric prince. In fact, you could argue that he is easily the most evil Daedric prince if we were to try and quantify evil.
I'd probably say so,
normal
yeah.
morality. Like, there are some other contenders, but I think Molag Bal takes the cake.
Well, people try to say, and fair enough, you can't really apply morality to the Daedra. But when it comes to Molag Bal, it's really hard to find any ulterior motive. He's kind of just in it for the domination. And he's not really, he's not really interested, at least with people like, say, even Mafala, where you don't really understand what she's planning. She's kind of working on something. Whereas Molag Bal is I just want to enslave you.
And it's also like torment and like suffering and pain does sort of really seem to be part of his sphere as well, like through the domination. Like he does like, getting with the magnifying glass with the ants and like burning them alive in the most brutal way possible to like
I think that would be too nice for Molag Bal. I feel like he would have the ants eat each other but not be able to die and just live in eternal pain. I'm serious. That's his kind of stuff. I think he could just kill people, but he chooses not to. He likes to make it like a display that lasts forever, especially for Daedric princes. They don't have the same concept of time, so...
As an example, I think it was like of the Reachman, I think it was like Cinderheart clan or something, where they basically do the same thing. They worship Molag Bal, and they do the same thing for the Briarheart ritual. They tear out the heart and everything, but instead of replacing it with a Briarheart, they put hot coals in there and burn them alive.
What's I couldn't grasp about that, reading the book that's in, is what the purpose of that is. Like, does that lead to some kind of Briarheart creation? Or is it just an execution? Because it doesn't specify. It just kind of says in place of the, your typical Briarheart thing, they just put in a bunch of hot coals.
Maybe the way it's said, maybe it does. Maybe it is something. Like a Briarheart of some sort, some modified kind. But I at first thought it was just a torture, really, like a gruesome death.
Who knows? But he's not a very nice guy, and in addition to all of that, which we'll obviously get into and explain more, he also has a massive reputation as being a kind of father of the undead, and notably the creator of vampires, when he forcibly took the virginity of Lamay Bal, who was a Nedic woman,
and killed her in the process.
And she kind of became... the first vampire.
And he did it all to spite RK as well. It's like... Yeah, he's a pretty dodgy fella.
That's the other thing. He is quite a spiteful Daedric prince. Like, he will just do things to... I mean, to be fair, they all are. Like, I mean, a lot of them. They all try and get back at each other and, push and shove and whatever. But he's also quite egotistical, which is something that most people never really talk about. You'll notice, because Daedric princes... don't really have a set form, but he chooses to look, like this demon with the classic head and face that you see kind of engraved into the mace of Molag Bal. But that iconography is everywhere. It's all over his realm. It's in, the lights. It's in like doors and walls, and it's just all over the place. And I think there's a quote somewhere about his own face looking back at him in his realm at all times.
Yeah.
And Molag Bal will watch from his palace in Cold Harbor, where everything stares back at him with his own face, and he will gloat and mock and gorge on the souls of mortals. So he seems to really like this scary look.
Well, even if you look at too, like, to just connect it to ego, like the whole process of domination is kind of an assertion over something else and asserting yourself, like your ego over everything else. You want everything under the domain of Molag Bal. Like you kind of do have it's kind of connected intrinsically to a big ego. Like, and even his attempts with the plane meld and to bring everything into his domain.
I think it's even viewed as weak by like Dagon in the sense of like, you know, if you have to like force people into submission for your own, I don't know, ego amusement or something. You get what I'm getting at. Yeah. There's actually a good one by Fleminus Auctor about Dagon versus Bal, because a lot of people kind of see similarities between them, and obviously there are similarities, but they're also very different. This quote says, Mehrunes Dagon revels in direct destruction. His cultists will set your city on fire and burn it to the ground. Molag Bal exists to dominate, and here's something we haven't really talked about as much, and deceive. His cultists will persuade you that a plague is loose, and the only way to stop it is to burn your city down yourself. So that's another thing about kind of why he's so evil, because he's deceptive and he's extremely patient. This is the kind of person who would be willing to wait for thousands of years just to have some plan unfold, but not a conspiracy like Dagon to just overthrow or you know, be a revolution and turn the hourglass on its head and shake things up just because he can. Because he just wants to, you know, do something horrible to someone. And there's even a quote that says that he prefers lies, you know, to hurt people and to break them down, except where the truth hurts more. And then he prefers the truth.
I think in a way, this is going to get a little bit deep a little bit early on, but I think one of the reasons why he seems like a more boring prince is because with Lig, one of the adjacent places, which you could kind of consider to be a different Kalpa in a way, he was supposedly the tyrant ruler of Lig. The dregs ruled everything, and he was the chief of the dreg. And in the current Kalpa, the one that we know, I almost feel like he's lost a lot of his power, and now he's just hell-bent on dominating. He's hell-bent on dominating people and dominating Tamriel to kind of reclaim that control he hasn't had. So I think that's why he's so one-dimensional, is because that's all he cares about.
But I wonder how one-dimensional he was before when he was the ruler. If he was just in control and, you know, winning, but, you know, doing the same stuff.
I mean, it would explain Dreg society. How you've got, you know, like the classic quote, which is, you know, the Mundus was once ruled over solely by the tyrant Dreg kings, each to their own dominion, and border wars were fought between their slave oceans. They were akin to the time totems of old, yet evil and full of mockery and profane powers. No one that lived did so outside of the sufferance of the dregs. It's like, yeah, that sounds like Molag Bal.
I mean, it's funny, even if you look at some of the societies that have chosen to worship him, they only kind of prove even more just how evil he is when you look at what they do, like the Aelids.
That's the thing too. Is
Molag
like,
Bal.
I mean, obviously he's pretty, you know, immoral. Most societies, even in Tamriel, would agree that he's immoral. So his worship's usually been exclusive to certain like groups or so, like some of the Aelid city-states that did turn to him, or some Reachman clans, or some cults spread throughout the place, but you never really find him in like a core place of any sort of like broader society's pantheon, because, you know, inherently he's just too screwed up.
He doesn't have much utility. He's not very useful for any culture.
That's the thing, because if you do want kind of domination and power, there are other Daedric princes to pick who can kind of give you the same thing but have a better philosophical angle. You could probably trust them a little bit more because they don't have a reputation for deceiving and inflicting pain. Although an interesting thing about Molag Bal, and it's hard to know just how solid this is, but he does seem to have some sort of respect for people who kind of are similar to him, like powerful people who like to dominate and, you know, they don't take shit. And like this kind of archetype he tends to like, but I don't think that necessarily gives you any kind of safety from him, you know?
Just really just quick too. Talking about the Aelids as well. There is and I think this would be a fair assumption. This is just my like interpretation or guess, but most of the tortures and all of the horrible things that like Fire King Hadhul and like setting kids alight and all that, I reckon mostly I can imagine is Molag done in the name of Molag Bal. Like I don't really find any like torture really is his thing.
There is actually a pretty direct link there, Scott, with the flesh sculpture kind of stuff, because there's actually a flesh sculptor in the Imperial kind of city area in Elder Scrolls Online. There's I think it's a Zivalai. I remember fighting some powerful Zivalai, but known to be like a flesh sculptor. And that's all, Molag Bal kind of like zone, so to speak. All the Cold Harbor Daedra and things pouring out. There's actually there's a thing here where it says the city citizens were brought to the Imperial prison where a flesh sculptor, powerful necromancer who held mastery over flesh, turned mortal skin and organs into carriers for plague and disease, creating flesh devices that would spew noxious clouds to contaminate the earth around them. And Molag Bal's generals plan to deploy 1,000 of these siege engines throughout the city, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I would definitely say that he was involved. As much as the Aelids were said to do that kind of stuff for art, not necessarily as like an offensive strategy or anything like that, yeah, I think it's safe to say that he was involved with a lot of those things.
Two other quick things. One's just a little tiny little trivia piece of information, but in the language of the Aldmeri language, his name translates to stone fire, and or you could reverse that, and maybe they speak, some languages flip and reverse like verbs and nouns and
Firestone.
So Firestone, but it's very clear that it's like a hellish kind of thing. Like, if you think fire and brimstone, you're thinking like hell and all that imagery. It's trying to convey like the most evil sort of prince. But another big thing about him, outside of just the domination sort of angle, and corruption is another big part of it, but a big core thing that all ties back to and ties to domination as well is this sort of harvester of souls. He wants to collect souls and own souls. Like slavery is almost like part of his thing, but slavery of the soul. And so it's just this, he's in this big effort to dominate, not just like this sort of like physical kind of like, I'll dominate you and kill you or make you a physical slave. It's like a metaphysical spiritual level. For all time I want your souls and gather them up. And
at least Shea Gorath is kind of like having fun with it. He'll claim your soul forever, but he's not evil per se. He's just crazy, and crazy people can do some kind of quote evil stuff, but they're not doing it out of malice. They're doing it because they're nuts.
I don't even think Molag Bal likes
What would you
cheese.
prefer?
Pretty sure. But
what would you prefer? I mean, they both sound terrible, but at least in the Shivering Isles, you have a chance of some Mania Realm kind of like crazy fun stuff. The other one, you're just going to be toiling away in Cold Harbor. And hold on, let me just finish this. I'm pretty sure it's said that when he takes your soul and you don't have a soul anymore, but you still exist, it causes incredible like anguish and pain and like mental deterioration almost. Like it's not a pleasant state to be in forever.
I'd say the only major difference is at least he's predictable, but is that a good thing when you're predictably going to be enslaved? I don't know, but...
Yeah, probably not. Devil you know versus devil you don't know. I'd be picking the don't know in that situation.
I feel like he probably, this is a bit of speculation, but wanted to mold the Aelids to be his next kind of like master dominator race on Tamriel.
Like the Dregs.
Because with the Dregs, we perceive them as being, this animalistic culture, but... They're Vivek calls them the elves of the sea. So they obviously had some, they were an intelligent race and obviously were able to rule the world. But, all of this talk about how he's kind of wants to create his dominion on Mundus, and like Cold Harbor, as his realm of Cold Harbor looks exactly like Tamriel if it was completely corrupt. Almost like Lig might have looked under his rule, because there's descriptions like...
Gross, yeah.
The sky is on fire, the ground is sludge but traversable. I see blackened ruins all around me. That goes on for a bit, and then it's like, I could hear Morian Zenith weep at the images he saw, and shiver at the sight of the Imperial Palace splattered with blood and excrement. It's like, that could have been the Aelids with their slaves. Their slaves were painting the walls of the Imperial city.
with excrement too. Like it just has to be that much more foul and disgusting. And there's something extra gross about I'm not sure what the quote is, but something about his realm and perfume. Like there's a smell of like flesh or like decay, but also like sweet perfume.
Is that Molag Bal?
I remember it being another Daedric prince, but then I swear I saw the same quote. Maybe I'm mixing it up.
I almost thought it was
because
Moonshadow, but I'm not certain.
That's no. I thought that too. Hold on. You boys keep talking. I'm gonna double check.
One direction to sort of take it, maybe a place to sort of focus it down a little bit on, is corruption, and even when you're talking about like his Cold Harbor, you can look at is just a corruption of Tamriel itself, and covering the imperial city in excrement and blood and all of that kind of stuff. It's like a profane sort of move, or taking the beautiful things and making it disgusting and foul, or corrupting it. So you could say, for example, the flesh sculptures of the Aelids are like a corruption of what could just be normal art or something that's not flesh sculptures, or his corruption of life through the vampires, and and creating these soulless sort of undead. And that corruption, like even in Morrowind, the Dunmer know him as one of the four corners of the House of Troubles, and he is known to corrupt Dunmer purity, and he always wants to try and screw up bloodlines and so on. There's this real corrupting element. Even if you look at the quest in the Elder Scrolls for Oblivion, where you take this guy and you're trying to get him so angry so that he murders you in anger because you keep on insulting his wife or whatever. You're doing this for Molag Bal, and then he kills you. You come back alive, but he thinks it's like corrupting a hero.
It's
kind
not
of
destruction.
thing. I think
Mehrunes Dagon wants to tear things down, whereas Molag Bal wants them to stay. He just wants them to be awful.
Yeah. It's like, if you can imagine, he wants the creation of Darth Vader, where he can see the idea of some sort of hero turning into a villain seems very in his sort of
the Oblivion quest is
just
do we want to talk about that?
Well, we'll just sort of I just sort of that was enough to say on, I think. But people can look into it more or so on, but more or less it's having a hero murder you so you can,
what do you specifically provoke him and then drop the mace so that he can use it against you, right?
And he's there praying at his dead wife's grave, and it's just terrible. By the way, may have zoned out there a little, but I've got this fact check for you. So yes, the perfume seems true. It's from Rain's Hand, and it says 3 Rain's Hand, 2920, Cold Harbor, Oblivion, listed there as the location. Talks about Sotha's Sill, going through the blackened halls of the palace. It says all around him, nasty gelatinous creatures scurried into the reeds. Bursts of white fire lit up the upper arches of the hall before disappearing, and smells assaulted him. Rancid death one moment, sweet flowered perfume the next.
I almost imagine the perfume is kind of like rotten fruit and flowers that have started to wilt, as opposed to actually nice smelling perfume. Because that's kind of, natural corruption of the flesh. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Obviously, too, the creation. One thing I just want to bring up, because I just love, I love some Morrowind concept art. But how they have the Daedric helms, and they have them of to represent different Daedric princes.
Yep.
There's this concept art of the face of the Forbidden Tickle, which is obvious what that's alluding to. But it's just an interesting sort of. It's just a cool looking mask and so on, and I love
there needs to be more
funny to
of
call
that.
it poetic, but
So much more than just your
for
basic
sure.
helmet.
More than more than the kind of art style we've been seeing in Elder Scrolls Online with your Daedric Titans and your vampire lords who look like Tekken characters. There's just too thick and beefy,
Interestingly too, even if you wanted to, if you look at Molag Bal as he's depicted in basically Daggerfall through to sort of Oblivion, even his face and depiction is much more animal looking, kind of it's longer as his physical horns and so on. The newer one, which I don't mind at all, the newer one's cool too, but they're still I guess it's just
more,
different.
It's more demonic. It's more classic demon looking now. Before, even his whole, it's not just his face, his whole deal was a mix of animals. He was this green skinned I guess, humanoid with like a goat-like face and
you could kind of
goat legs and elven ears.
Yeah, like you could kind of see that as another sort of corruption on like the sort of form of the Elnefey, and it's like mixed it with beast and weird stuff and pieces of everything. And Elnefey is like, you know, elves and men and stuff like that. But yeah, where we would like to go next with Molag Bal, because
It's actually funny. His concept art for Elder Scrolls Online, I mean, as we like to say, always looks better. It's the same thing. It just looks like scrawnier and just a little more like yuck.
Well, you mean he looks scrawnier in ESO?
No, in the ESO concept
Right.
concept art than he does in just actual.
Yeah, I think it's.
ESO. I may be wrong. Yeah, I'd say.
I honestly think he's a bit more sinister looking that way. Like Mehrunes Dagon being gigantic and all powerful makes a lot of sense for him tearing things down. Whereas, I see the art you're talking about, which we'll make sure we put up. But he's very sinewy and lean, Molag Bal in his art, and it just makes him look really terrifying.
Yeah.
what do you think his end game is?
Total, probably. It sounds
Like
boring,
to-
but
yeah.
total like domination of.
Because I kind of like the idea you're
of
saying
the mortal
about,
realm.
like, you know, maybe in a previous Kalpa or whatever, however you interpret League and all that, that at least in the past, whether that be a whole other timeline or something, he was like, you know, dominating the whole world, whatever. Maybe he's working to get to the same spot. I mean, he attempted it through the plane meld.
Well, the Khajiit expand on it a bit with their interplay of Molag Bal, Meridia, and Mehrunes Dagon. But you can imagine that with League, Molag Bal's running the show. Meridia and, you know, the Magnagi in general kind of needed to upset the balance because Molag Bal had too much power. So that's where Mehrunes Dagon comes into it. And in the Khajiit pantheon, I'll try and find the quote, but Molag Bal and Mehrunes Dagon fight. You know, they're constantly at conflict. And then Molag Bal tries to use Mehrunes Dagon as a tool. So, you know, they obviously have a history. And I think that probably potentially originates from his domination of Lig. And it could be why he's kind of like, you know, he's dangerous, but he's not really doing that much. He had his plane meld, but other than that, he's like, oh yeah, make this one guy go crazy with anger.
It's interesting. Sorry, I was just going to say it's
go.
interesting that he actually assaulted or tried to assault the Lunar Lattice alongside Mehrunes and Meridnunda. Oh, Meridia. And
Which is interesting too, because Meridia, I mean, in the story of ESO, like you have the two, like the Meridia worshipping Aelid city-state and the Molag Bal worshipping one, and they were at odds and so on. And in the plot, there's these, Meridia and Molag Bal are opposed to one another. But what's and also even like their spheres, you know, Molag Bal is often related to the undead and stuff like that. And then you've got Meridia, who absolutely despises it and so on. And it's like, you know, the light and so on. It's interesting that that they would work together in that mythology or whatever, because these is a lot of the like, this Daedric prince's enemies are is Daggerfall era stuff. But there's some, you know, there's fun interpretations from them. But like, there's Meridia is stated as one of the enemies, but another one, and you could expect like RK and like Lamay Bal, they're all there. But Boethia is also mentioned as an enemy of Molag Bal, and you could say maybe like, oh, well, the good Daedra generally sort of stick together, and they're opposed to the Four Corners of the House of Troubles. But you also have, he was at one point allied with Azura, which I'm going to find the source. It was is Oblivion faction data in Daggerfall.
Okay.
Because there's an interesting thing actually with the Boethia tie-in too on their differences, which is that Molag Bal basically expects all of his followers to just do what he says without question. Like, you must obey me because I'm dominating you. Whereas Boethia kind of has more of like a teacher aspect, in the sense of like, you should question and oppose authority. And not just get down on your knees for me and do whatever I say just because I say it. Like, she almost wants them to understand on a deeper level, not just follow because follow.
Boethia is all about free will. You know, that's kind of what the Chimer, that's why the Chimer exists. So if Molag Bal removes all, you know, the individualism, you are just a slave, that is all you are, then you fundamentally can't achieve the Sijic endeavor. You can't strive to be more. And yeah, so it's obvious why they'd be against each other, but why Molag Bal and Azura would ever team up, that's probably
a bit funny. I mean, you actually do see the rivalry with Boethia carry through into Skyrim. With
the
Molag
quest,
Bal's quest and the mace, and priest of Boethia has desecrated his shrine.
And one more thing
and all of that stuff.
about Meridia and Molag Bal, I almost imagine they have kind of like a very turbulent relationship, like almost, because Meridia is called the wife of Merens. Sorry, not the wife of Merens, the wife of Molag in the Khajiit pantheon. So it's almost like they have a really difficult relationship where they love each other one minute and are working together, and then they're undermining each other the next. So that could almost like reconcile some of their conflicting accounts.
Unhappy marriage or something.
A very unhappy marriage.
Well, that would also be potentially the illicit spectre that she consorted with if it's not Lorcan.
Interesting indeed.
That might even make more sense, because if you're actually looking at the monomyth, they kind of talk about like cast out of the Magna Gi for consorting with illicit spectra, but that sort of kind of feels like, because they are known as Magna Gi in that time, that Mundus is already formed. And if Mundus is already formed, then Lorcan's probably already gone, or like dead, like his heart sustains the world and so on. So maybe it was something else.
Well, it's almost like, God, I'm forgetting the exact Greek mythology now, but it's something like it comes out of Greek mythology, where you almost have on Lig, you've got Molag, who's like ruling the world as the kind of king of the dregs, and maybe Meridia is his wife, and then he scorns her and is focusing on dominating the world. So then she retreats into the dark in the bowels of Lig to create this monster to tear down her husband. And it's kind of like, all this deceitful stuff going on. So those three are really intertwined. But yeah, this is all speculation, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, another interesting thing about Molag Bal is that he actually seems to like experimenting, which is a part of him not often talked about. He has in Cold Harbor the Vile Laboratory, which he uses for all kinds of horrific experiments, and it kind of ties in with the whole, I guess, genetic splicing or ruining bloodlines and all that kind of stuff, where he actually created the mix of a Dremora and a Zivali called a Zivkin, which is basically like a fusion of the two. And they're Daedra that, work for Molag Bal that you fight in the Elder Scrolls Online.
It's like a slightly more manageable Zivali, right? Because the Zivali are very insubordinate. They don't really want to follow orders, but mixing it with the really like the strict rules that Dremora live by, combining those two, you almost get like slightly more domesticated Zivali.
Is it, I think it's a similar deal with the Daedric Titans.
Yeah.
The skeleton ripped from a dragon, and then through modifying it and substituting the soul for a Daedric vestige creates the Daedric Titans and so on. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of on brand for him in terms of like the corruption of things, which I think is the more interesting part of it, because domination can be by itself can be rather plain. It's just like, I enslave. It sounds like the most generic villain ever.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and obviously like the side of him, the really dark side of him is like the ultimate form of corruption as well. Like what happened with LeMay and whatnot.
Yeah, like corruption of love, or what's
corruption of purity.
Sex is what but sex just being usually a beautiful thing between two things, a thing of pleasure, corrupt it and turn it to a thing of pain. And obviously very physically turning them into a vampire and losing your soul. Like it's pretty rough. But yeah, that's another thing too, like the pain. Like pain in inflicting misery upon people seems to be part of his thing, and torment. The Daedric Prince of BDSM, but with no safe words.
That's the title of the video.
Yeah, Prince of BDSM, no safe word. Yeah.
I mean, he even forces people to like drink certain potions and stuff as well. I know the Mind Shriven, which can be mortal or Daedra. Basically, they're forced to drink this potion, which shrivels their mind, but it makes them a husk of their former self, and they can become incredibly violent because of that. AKA another enemy to fight in the Elder Scrolls Online, but it's on brand. It's on brand.
Yeah, he does very much embody that idea that the Daedra can't really create something unique, but they're very good at mimicking stuff from Mundus.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally used the organs of these people to create like different weapons, and like he has all kinds of weird biological creations, both enemies, weapons. Yeah, just a lot of foul stuff. And unsurprisingly, he has a lot of enemies. Unsurprising.
We should also, I guess, too, that sort of touch on the dregs, because another thing that ties the dregs to him or so on is the idea that from the previous couple, when he was like torn down or defeated or whatever, that his, I forgot the exact wording, but his carapace or whatever fell to earth, and a Dunmerry child wore it and so on, and became this beast called the Ruddy Man, or which Vivek had a battle with. But if you even take that again, like he's wearing his carapace,
a dead carapace
corrupted him,
is what he called it.
Right, and turns him, he corrupts a small child into a terrible monster once again, and then Vivek,
you're taking something extremely pure and making it like the most horrid thing.
Yeah.
Well, then doesn't Vivek return the carapace to the dregs, who say they're going to, seal it away or keep it from ever causing problems again? And then I don't know whether they're corrupted by it, but they end up unleashing it, and it's like you can't. With anything related to Molag Bal, it's going to be treacherous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying. I'll find, because we should probably also the pomegranate banquet. That's right.
Oh God.
The everyone's favorite. So this
Scott,
is where
you can handle this one.
I think that's 7-12.
So basically Molag. There's a time where Vivek basically I forgot the, hold on, I have to look up the exact conditions of the beginning or so on, but the essential part is that he gives I think it's just Vivek's head, and he basically has he takes his feet, his body. One second.
And then his head is also separated, and he gives his head to Molag Bal to do with as he will. There's
Vivek lay with Molag Bal for 80 days and 8, though headless in that time.
And they all whipped out their spears, incling all of the people gathered at the banquet. Well,
we know dinner is that. It's very explicit,
dots, but there you go. Anyone watching the video knows for sure what we're referencing.
But also there's the part of the creation of the spear. Mm-hmm. So, but Vivek made of his spear a more terrible thing, from a secret he had bitten off from the king of rape. And so he sent Molag Bal tumbling into the crack of the biters and swore forever that he would not deem the king beautiful ever again. Vivek wept as he slew all those around him with his terrible new spear. He named it Muatra, which is milk taker. And even the Chimera mystics knew this fury. But as the line before, but basically more or less it was like biting his cock off essentially and creating a spear out of it.
I wonder who wrote that law.
One way to kind of wrap that back to something we talked about earlier, I know we're kind of writing it off as it doesn't really happen, but if you're going to try and find a link between Molag Bal and Azura, it could be like with Vivek saying he swore never to call Molag Bal beautiful ever again, because if you feed Molag Bal's ego, his vanity, it's very destructive. Whereas we know that Azura is very heavily, she cares a lot about her ego. You're supposed to feed her vanity.
It can be beneficial too.
Except,
maybe she was jealous.
He said it's
Someone
just to
else
find
was
that
being called beautiful.
The specific quote, because people love it. So Vivek, who had a grain of Am's mercy, set about to teach Molag Bal in the ways of belly magic. They took out their spears and compared them. Vivek bit new words onto the king of rape so that it might give more than ruin to the uninitiated. This has since become a forbidden ritual, though people still practice it in secret. But there you go.
Wow. No elaboration is needed anymore.
But,
that's how he discovered Kim, the syllable of royalty. That's what Vivek gets out of that situation, as well as getting Muatra.
Yeah. So it's he's interesting demonic figure,
Yeah. Well, I suppose we could move on to talking about some of his artifacts, perhaps. Though, he does not have many artifacts that are for the player to wield. A lot of them that you'll find listed are just kind of random objects or instruments more in the Elder Scrolls Online. Such as the Mortem Vivicus, which is like this big magical kind of spell.
Orb.
that just held a bunch of souls and can be unleashed.
They're almost more like
cause a bunch of
Daedric phenomenons rather than actual artifacts. Things that happen during the plane meld, that are inexplicable.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just sort of too like how the US kind of divides them up or so on. Like, I personally like regard more so the weapons or individual sort of items or pieces or something
I
that
agree.
seem significant as the artifacts.
Because you could start putting it to anything. Like, you could just say like, Nocturnal's, I don't know, cloak, or
that big like siege engine thing that comes out of the Gates of Oblivion. Gate of Oblivion. Like, is that an
simply
artifact?
being
like,
from Oblivion doesn't
Dagon.
make it an artifact? Yeah.
But they're significant pieces of things, but a lot of them like just they don't have the zhuzh.
I suppose you obviously have the Mace of Molag Bal, which is pretty cool, and obviously as a kind of weapon of domination, I think the enchantment of taking the magic and stamina away from the victim, it's kind of draining them of their vitality, is a pretty fitting thing. Although it didn't always do that. It had Soul Trap at one point.
Which I feel like is just very kind of... I feel like that should always be there for the mace. It just is exactly what Molag Bal wants to do. Trap souls. Which is all... Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, which is also kind of cool, like if you we like to do this and talk about it, but you can talk about every Daedric artifact from like kind of like a gameplay terminology like perspective or the like a lore kind of perspective. But when I see like Soul Trap on the Mace of Molag Bal in my like head canon, I don't really go and look at it and like, oh, it's just like a tool like every other enchanted sort of Soul Trap something. I see it as like sending your soul to Molag Bal in Cold Harbor rather than just like, yay, filling soul gems. Like,
I wonder when it did Soul Trap actually, because
Skyrim has Soul Trap.
Oh, is it Skyrim's one that's Soul Trapped? I always thought it was. Oh, I think I'm thinking of Volendrung with just the stamina enchantment. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
because in Oblivion it was just absorb strength and absorb magicka, and in Morrowind it was actually the same. Back when attributes were a thing, which is cool. Because, you're taking away their strength, and then as you continue to smack them with the mace, you deal more damage because you're becoming stronger at the same time.
Well, they do essentially the same thing because attributes aren't the same anymore. They're limited in how they can do it gameplay. But in Skyrim, it's damage stamina, damage magicka, and Soul Trap.
That's right. It was one of the unique artifacts that actually had 3 effects.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
And it looks cool. Yeah. It's one of the better looking Daedric artifacts.
As if it's not inspired. Like, when I think of it, I just think of like Sauron in the Lord of the Rings movies with his big mace. When he's like smacking the elves, like flying and so on, like just some giant demonic.
There's definitely a bit of inspiration from him.
It does look like
that.
Like
even in Cold Harbor, I can't remember what they are, but in ESO there are certain little things you have to destroy that are like essentially Sauron's eye but blue. There's a lot of Mordor inspiration.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cringe as well, actually.
What's that then?
If you wanted to talk about, sometimes I think the writers in Elder Scrolls Online, they go a bit too far.
Whoa.
And there was actually a court of contempt in Cold Harbor where there's a bunch of... basically, you get put on trial for transgressions there if you commit a crime. And by the way, there are a bunch of rules, 701 edicts, which you have to follow as one of his minions. And you go to this court called the Court of Contempt, and you are entitled to a council of scamps outfitted in puffy wigs. Cringe. Hold on, it gets worse. But scamps are not allowed to speak in the Court of Contempt, and the court has a 100% conviction rate, of the defendants, otherwise known as the guilty. Now, one of the most horrendous pieces of law of all time is a case where a minion put a whoopee cushion, I'm not even kidding, on Molag Bal's throne. And so he was therefore, this Dremora was imprisoned in a nanoplane as his punishment for the whoopee cushion incident. This is real law, ladies and gentlemen.
Molag Bal's a bit insecure, isn't he? If he can't really take that. That's more like his vanity coming out. You play a little harmless trick on him.
There shouldn't be whoopee cushions in the Elder
What do you
Scrolls.
mean?
I really do.
They've got all this
I
magic.
really
and
do.
You can't have a whoopee cushion. What's wrong with
You
that?
can't have it. You
I
can't
do
have
hope
it.
that the Elder Scrolls 6, like going forward, they can kind of take like the lore essence of a lot of the bunch of stuff from Elder Scrolls Online.
That's
but
good.
yeah, the good stuff, but kind of just like quietly like forget about, like, I don't want 50 mounts in ESO and all of this kind of stuff that's like the, or like, oh look, I've got my pet scamp with a wig.
ESO is a
it's
dragon
like that.
break for sure. It's like a part where time Akatosh just broke, everything was chaos, and then we just forget about that.
It's just mainly because I guess, like, I feel like what sells a piece of fiction to you is when you can kind of like take it seriously, but when sometimes it's too much of a parody of it. So like the whole scamp and wigs thing and so on, and like the 15 different Atronach type mounts, and there's just they're gameplay things. It's I just don't really treat it heavily as lore, though they do kind of write it into the lore. Like, technically this is the problem with anything. Like, in terms of what's canon lore, if it's in the games that are lore canon, that it's lore. You cannot like the lore, but it's still lore, unfortunately. But it's there. I just sort of don't think about it too often,
Do you think that whoopee cushion should be an artifact?
That's the thing, yeah. It's like what's an artifact and what isn't. I will say something else about Molag Bal is that he has kind of not well clarified son and a daughter listed. A son, a Daedric Titan, a daughter named Molag Grunder, a powerful winged twilight.
See, I kind of sometimes there's examples or other examples. I think it was like Malakath and his son, which is like an orc or so on. It seems kind of like
that one was
demigod-ish
biological kind of son
yeah,
vibe.
that's kind of what I mean. Like, but then when you hear he's got other children, like somewhat you kind of consider it like to specify as a child that it's not just some favorite data or something that had some role like personally in their creation or something. But that could also, I don't know, just a combination of like them particularly pulling the vestige. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be like a mother-father conception kind of deal.
You could really just be like any creature from their realm or something is just their children. I mean, with Malakath, I would consider every orc his child. If you wrote that, I wouldn't take it literally.
Yeah, but these ones are almost written to be taken literally, and in it there's this weird kind of like separation. Although I do agree with you, like the Zivkin we were talking about, if Molag Bal, created them in his laboratory, is he not their father? It's
because that's the thing with Molag Grunder. She has like a Frost Atronach Nomeg Gwai, who is her like boyfriend essentially, and apparently Molag Bal doesn't approve of it. So that does sound a little bit biological, doesn't it?
Maybe this is where the allied with Azura once. Maybe it was a secret little fling, and Molag Grunder is actually Azura's kid, because winged twilights are like known to be in her realm and are often associated with Azura. So there you go. Maybe it was a little fling.
This is it.
Yeah, let's ship Molag Bal on Azura. Well, yeah, I was gonna say, like, if you want to go further into like some Kirkbride kind of like outer law stuff, there is that whole I think it's like the trial of Vivek or something. I forget which piece exactly, but where Vivek gets Muatra, which we previously know is representative of, as discussed, and like specifically like silencer, like jams it into her mouth. Azura's mouth and so on.
This is some out of law stuff.
Yeah, but it's the trial of Vivek set. I think it's set after the fall of the tribunal or the return thereof. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's out of law stuff. There was just this comic thing that went around or so on, and it was on a thumbnail of a YouTube video, like a popular YouTube video at one point, and then they changed it, but I just remember all the comments were about it. Yeah, anyway, you get it. You can look it up. But, yeah, the forbidden tickle.
Yeah,
if you actually look at that mask too, it's got like a protruding tongue that looks sharp.
It looks very phallic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what else there is to talk about.
Because we kind of covered vampires a lot in the vampire.
Yeah, he has a lot of servants, but none of them are like particularly crazy interesting. Like, Twilights and everything becomes, like classic ESO skinning stuff, but like cold flame skinned.
Yeah.
So like everything's the blue fire.
I
And I'm
can't-
pretty
I-
sure, hold on. No,
Yeah.
I'm going to drop another cringe bomb on you.
Alright.
I'm pretty sure the cope for that was something about a regular flame Atronach being summoned in his palace and like smashing one of his favorite.
Oh, I remember that.
Things.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, only that's banned, so you have to summon the blue ones now.
See, I kind of like forget that, but I don't. I like it's somewhat the you can rationalize it in this way, that the blue fire, but as a corruption of actual fire. And if Cold Harbor truly is like a cold place, but there's fire everywhere, but it's blue and cold, and like imagine it, you get like, you know how you get like cold burns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like imagine that as how you put your hand on the fire, and that's what it is. It's a corruption of fire itself.
Blue fire is usually just really hot, normal
Hot,
fire.
yeah,
Although-
but like,
yeah, and like instead of,
let's run
say
with-
you imagine the Deadlands with the kind of oceans of lava, he's got this kind of azure plasm that's where the Daedra are all born from.
Azura's plasm.
Yeah, it was one of
From
his.
their illicit relationship where they created Molag Bal.
Yeah, there's a lot of plasm.
We're making this canon.
Let's roll.
We're mything it into existence. It was a nice sculpture that was smashed by the Flame Atronach. His favorite ice sculpture.
Poor guy.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna have to
I
enslave
bet Azura
1,000.
gave it to him.
Yeah, enslave like 10,000 people for that one.
Yeah. He reportedly has terrible hygiene and smells of rotting
Yeah,
flesh.
I find that I was when I was reading up on Molag Bal yesterday, I found that to be a kind of weird thing to think about Daedric princes having hygiene.
You know what?
Do they really clean, or I feel like it's a choice to be like, mortals hate bad smells. I want to be smelly. I'm smelly now. Like, I don't know. Do they floss? I just don't think so.
I think inevitably that's going to happen in any sort of like, because I think a lot, like there's a decent amount of cringe with Molag Bal because of ESO and the whole plane melt thing, and basically just being a Mare Dagon 2.0 and giving him all demonic stuff and lots of enemies and so on. But in the same way that it's like yeah, it's cool, I guess, that he has like thousands and thousands of titles, but it just becomes everything. Oh, he's the schemer too, and he's the Lord of the Undead too, and it just kind of, you kind of lose the flavor of a character if you wash them out with so much stuff, like everything bad. You see, and that's why, like, generally I find the corruption as a more interesting part of him, to like take something and then turn it in another way that other people would dislike.
Well, to throw ESO a bone, Cold Harbor looks great. Like, wandering around Cold Harbor is awesome. And yeah, all the corruptions, but...
Does it look great?
I think so. I mean, I like the look of it.
I feel like it's fitting for what his sort of domain is. Like, some Daedric princes too, like, I feel like...
I don't think it looks bad. It's just kind of generic to me. I don't know.
Yeah, but some I feel like should be kind of... It's kind of like, you know, sometimes you might go like, oh, he's a Daedric realm, and at least you'll see a description of it, and it's envisioned a certain way, and it's like, oh, it's all, you know, ash or something like that. But it's like very much connected to the theme. For example, like if you made like Mephala realm, the Spiral Scan, if you made it not like webby and spiders and towers and stuff outside of that, if you made it some like big, complex, different kind of... Like, Shivering Isles is a unique example, and they could get away with it because they can have, like, the whole, like, artistic stuff and craziness, and anything goes. Welcome to Alice in Wonderland. Whereas, like, you know, like, for example, like, the Deadlands is fitting for...
Same as Apocrypha. Apocrypha is a very kind of, like, one-skinned realm in a sense.
It's an expansion of
straightforward.
the
Yes. I don't know. I think I might have a kind of like hangover still from the Soul Can in Skyrim, where anything that's like that kind of purpley dark realm, and they use it a lot in the Elder Scrolls Online, like with Nocturnal or like other Daedric princes. I kind of just go like, ugh. Like, interestingly enough, is kind of a take not related to Molag Bal, but as much as Daedric realms are cool, I much prefer all of the Daedric interaction in the mortal realm than to the actual, like, exploring the realms. Outside of, like you said, the Shivering Isles is extremely interesting, and I think exploring the Isles is far more interesting than Sheogorath doing some stuff in Tamriel. There's an exception, but generally speaking, it's always the other way around, where I just prefer seeing how they influence the mortal realm.
I agree, and sometimes I also think like having a little like lore passage about what it looks like is sometimes cooler and more mysterious. Like you could
Like
probably
Malakath's realm.
yeah, but like you could even find, I'm sure you could find descriptions of Cold Harbor from before, like you're saying with the perfume stuff and the floor is sludge and all of that kind of stuff. To me, at least sounds cooler than even what it looks like. I don't mind how it looks now. I think it's pretty decent. But sometimes there's a power to mystery and like to make the world seem more expansive rather than necessarily showing it because it won't.
There's a degree of magic that will inevitably be removed by developing it in a game, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean...
And
yeah, I feel like Moonshadow would Azura's Realm would be one of the most interesting to see because I guess the more complex the sphere of the prince, the more complex the realm should then be.
But did you see what they did to the Somerset Isles architecture?
Yeah.
Imagine going to a realm where it's so bright and like moon, you know how it's all like so beautiful and like some get blinded by its beauty. All that, it's not going to be like that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's always going to
it'll be cherry
than.
blossoms and waterfalls, pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, Molag Bal.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. I'm not sure if we've got anything left to say. He is somewhat of a straightforward Daedric prince, which is why it's fairly easy to pin him as evil if we're going to use binary labels.
Unless he pins you, you know.
Unless he pins you.
He's that kind of guy.
Wow. Great way to end the podcast.
Yeah.
Social media links are in the description. So is our merch link if you want to get an awesome looking tee and support the channel. It's been Michael, Scott, and Drew, and we look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.